All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. We are preparing for the offseason, and we are starting this series, the 2023 offseason. Now that the draft is completed, we are starting with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I am joined by Logan Scholl. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you should be doing great because everyone has been saying that the Eagles won the draft. So I definitely want to get into that. But first of all, where can everyone find you and everything?
So you can find me on Twitter at Logan_Scholl. You can find me on Instagram, same place, and TikTok, Logan.Scholl. YouTube, I don't really post on YouTube, so you don't gotta worry about that. But Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, find me there.
All good stuff. Well, let's get into it. Obviously, the Eagles did a lot of great things last year and even added to that in the draft. So obviously, I'm guessing you're pretty excited for what Howie Roseman has done. And talk a little bit about the draft. And do you see them as the draft winner then for 2023?
So 2 years ago, I actually wanted Howie Roseman fired because I was very fed up with him. But past 2 years, he's performed. He's the MVP of Philly, I should say. Um, but as far as the draft goes, I don't know if I would call us the clear cut winners. I
Mm,
really liked I really liked what the Texans did because they were in such a bad position. No big
mhm.
players on either side of the ball. I don't know if I would have taken Stroud that early, but Will Anderson's going to be an absolute game changer, and they needed that. But Texans were my clear cut winner, and Eagles were too. And as far as the draft goes for the Eagles, when I saw Carter was available at 9 and the Eagles traded up, I was jumping out of my seat. And then at 30, Nolan Smith being there, it was everything just fell into place. It was like a miracle.
Well, yeah,
And
I was gonna say let's kind of get into that. So I am a Bears fan. We've talked about
mhm.
offline quite a bit, um, and the Bears did end up trading and with the Eagles and all of that. And it is my understanding the Bears were not sold on Jalen Carter because of workout that they had with him and him kind of just being out of shape and all that and just a lot of off the field stuff. So when you look at a talent like that, um, talk about his locker room fit within Philly and why it is such a great landing spot for him.
So I didn't believe Jalen Carter was a good fit for anybody but Philly because Philly's got the veterans in there. They got Cox, Graham, Reddick, Sweat, and then you got Carter's buddies. You got Davis, Dean, all those guys. You got the corners, the veterans. I was I wasn't scared about them taking him at all, and I thought he was gonna fall past 5, but I didn't think he was gonna get to 9. I felt like his talent was through the roof, and if you could pair him with a locker room like Philly, I think he's gonna be an amazing player for 10 plus years.
Yeah, I mean, you look at him. I mean, there's no question that the talent is there. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, with all the things in place, I mean, with the winning culture there, and with those veterans, even like Kelsey being there, I think that's definitely going to be helpful for him. And they're going to kind of hold him, you know, to a standard that he needs to continue to go with. And as a Bears fan, I agree that he wasn't a fit there just because they're continuing to ascend. They're trying to build a certain culture, and they're not there yet. And the Eagles obviously are there with being the Super Bowl last year. And when you kind of look at that, then are you do you see him as kind of starting day one, or is he going to be a rotation guy to start with, or what are you seeing for Jalen Carter?
So as far as that D line, interior D line rotation goes, I think you got to bump Cox down. I really like Milton Williams. I think you got to play Davis and Williams and then Cox and Carter in the backup kind of rotation. But I think you start Davis and Williams and then Carter and Cox come in, kind of like Cox being the veteran, the teacher, right next to Cox or Carter every single play. I like that more than Carter starting with Davis because I believe Davis is going to be a full time starter now.
Yeah, it's so crazy that you could get that high of a pick and it really be a luxury, depth piece. But you look at the Eagles, I mean, they really are kind of stacked all around. And when you look at some of the other pieces from the draft, talk about your excitement. You said for Nolan Smith and some of the other picks that they got in the draft.
So when I was mocking, actually, when I was mocking my drafts, I had Nolan Smith going at 10 to us. And I was
Mm,
and watching him fall away, I was like, all these teams need pass rushers. Why are they not taking him? Then I heard something about a pec issue, and I was like, you know who had a pec issue last year? The Kobe Dean. And he's going to
mhm.
be a great player for us this year. And we don't need Nolan Smith to contribute right now. We need him to contribute down the line, like week 10. Maybe he doesn't got to be healthy now. He's got to be healthy down the line next year and the years after.
So yeah, I mean, you talk about, I mean, this draft and the top two picks, not needing to be immediate contributors because usually, teams in the draft need at least one or two immediate contributors. I know my Bears do, but when you look at the rest of this draft, do you see anybody having an immediate impact to fill a hole, or is it just the rest of it is also depth pieces as well?
So obviously McKee, Ajomo, and Steen are going to be depth guys because I think Jurgens is going to take the spot at guard. But I really like Sidney Brown and Kelly Ringo. I mean, he's not going to be a starter. Obviously, we are very deep at corner. But Kelly Ringo, you look at him as a starter maybe next year, and Sidney Brown. So a few years ago, we drafted Kevon Wallace. He's been very, very underwhelming, and I thought Kevon Wallace was going to be the answer at safety, but for some reason we got an undrafted free agent last year, Reed Blankenship, who was going to take over that starting role, and then we picked up Edmonds. But I really think Brown, if I had to pick out of any of these guys, Brown would have the highest chance to start this year.
Yeah, it's crazy because he was in Illinois, right?
Hmm.
It's just crazy to think of. And obviously, I am also an Iowa Hawkeye, so I was had a chance to see that defense, and they were a tough defense. I mean, obviously you have him and then Witherspoon in that backfield. I mean, I mean, there's a lot of talent there.
Yeah, yeah, and when you play, they weren't playing amazing competition as far as offense goes. I mean, I'm pretty sure they played Ohio State, almost positive they did, and Michigan.
Mhm.
But when you have a lot of talent on defense, you guys can they can really play off of each other, and that just makes for good prospects and good NFL guys. So yeah, I'm really glad we got Brown.
So when you look at some of the storylines going into the training camp, what are you kind of targeted on? Like, what do you want to see kind of happen? To get prepared for the 2023 season.
So as far as training camp goes, I'm really looking at I really like who our starters are right now. Our veterans, I love the veterans, but I'm really interested to see who makes the final cut as far as young guys go. I really like Eli Ricks. We got him as an undrafted free agent out of Alabama. I really like a few guys that we got out of the undrafted free agent board. And I think there's a lot of guys on our team that we have to move on from. And we got to put these young guys into our roster and move on from guys like Zach McPherson,
Mm.
um, Kayvon Wallace, another name. And we really just got to get those young guys in there. And we got to move on from guys that are not performing to what we thought they would be performing to.
Well, speaking of a player that has, outperformed where a lot of people thought he would last year at this time, Jalen Hurts really took that step, obviously last year and proved, to be a Super Bowl quarterback. And really, if it wasn't for Superman Patrick Mahomes, he would have had a Super Bowl win there. So talk about him and his continued growth in this year, and what do you see that he needs to improve on?
So as far as last year goes, I think his stats were very deflated because we won a lot of games by 20, 30, 10, 15 points, and we were done with the games by the third quarter. And this year we're gonna be playing really, really good competition. I believe we are first strength of schedule, and I just need to see him play better against the best secondaries and defenses. I think he can improve on he really improved on pocket passing, and I think the one thing I can really see him improving on this year is through the middle passing and corners. I think he really needs to improve on that stuff. But other than that, man, he's a great player. And I was on this show last year talking about him. And I said he was going to go for MVP, and he did. But I think this is the year he wins it, obviously.
Mm.
I'm always optimistic about that. I think he's going to get a lot more stats with the better teams he's playing. And yeah,
So when you look at him, how much impact did having AJ Brown come in? How much impact did that have on him as well?
Jalen Hurts would not be the quarterback he is today without him because, I mean, you saw what he was doing with Devonta, but it
Mhm.
was tough to watch Quez Watkins as our wide receiver too, and Greg Ward. And now we have Zachwis, I believe that's how you say his name,
Mhm.
the guy from Atlanta. And I believe just having that depth and AJ Brown was
Oh,
monumental.
Zacchaeus. Yep.
Yeah, Zacchaeus.
Yep.
AJ Brown was absolutely monumental. If we did not get AJ Brown, he would not be the same player.
So I'm a Bears fan, and I think maybe you know where I'm going with this. When you look at Jalen Hurts and the improvement he made because of AJ Brown, um, what are you looking at for like Justin Fields in adding DJ Moore? I mean, is there a little bit of a comp there, or maybe not? Or what are your thoughts?
I was really high on DJ Moore last year. I thought he was going to really break out. But obviously the quarterback play over there in Carolina was just subpar. Um, but Justin Fields really has some weapons this year, some Jalen Hurts type weapons. Cole Kmet doesn't do it for me, but still, you got young guys in there. DJ Moore, I feel like he's going to break out this year. But the one thing that scares me is the offensive line. I
Mhm.
I think you guys at offensive line you really need to improve. And Justin Fields is maybe the most athletic quarterback I have ever seen. I watched him run for 170 yards on my Birds last year, and I was just dumbfounded. I was like, this guy is special. So I think having DJ Moore in there, I don't think he's going to take the Jalen Hurts type step, but he's going to take a big step this year.
Yeah, I would agree. As a Bears fan, I just want to see continued growth. I'm not expecting Super Bowl. I'm thinking maybe 9-8, but there
Mm.
has to be some improvement, absolutely. And you know, on the other side of the division, you have the Packers, and I talked to a lot of Packer fans, and they really are holding on to how well Jordan Love did against the Eagles. Talk a little bit about that game, and what do you see from Jordan Love? Do you see a lot of positives in that, or what do you see from when he faced the Eagles?
He really carved us up. When he was in there, he carved us up. Now, I think that could be because we were not ready to see him. That's usually how it goes, but there's not a lot of film on Jordan Love in the NFL, and he could have took a massive few steps while he was sitting behind Aaron Rodgers. And I do believe that. Do I think the Packers are a playoff team? Absolutely not. They don't have any Christian Watson's a good player. But other than that, you think Daubs is your two. I don't really like that. And you just got two rookie tight ends. You're kind of you're in a weird phase in Green Bay. You're not really contending and you're not really rebuilding. I think Jordan Love's going to be a great player, but right now I think he needs a year to play
Yeah,
before he could take a
and
step.
I would agree on that. Really, the only way quarterbacks learn is by playing. And I'm sure last year this time, a lot of people were thinking that it was time to move on from Hurts. You were in on Hurts. What did you think of Hurts getting that big of deal that he got? And do you think that it's really sustainable for him to continue to be at the level he was in 2022?
So I was thinking that they would get a 5-year deal done because if you go to 8 with a running quarterback, if you go to 8 years with a running quarterback, you start to see a decline in the productivity. So doing doing a 5-year, I believe it was 255 million, and I believe 160 of it was guaranteed. And the cap hits were, if you go look at the cap hits, man, Howie Roseman did a great job. It was a master class, and I was so surprised to see those numbers. And I think that's just the type of guy Jalen Hurts is. He just wants to win. And getting that deal done before Burrow, Herbert, and Jackson is going to prove very, very beneficial.
Absolutely agree on that. And so, do you still consider Jalen Hurts a running quarterback then?
See, that's really tough because after this big ascension in his passing game, you got it. He can throw the ball, and he's got weapons. So, and he's one of those guys. He can read defenses too, and I think his biggest threat would be on the ground. I think that's what teams are most scared of. And he's not someone who's going to rip off an 80-yarder like Justin Fields. He's a guy that he runs strong, and he runs 10 yards, 15 yards, 5 yards, and he just wears you down. So I would still call him a hybrid. I wouldn't call him a running quarterback or a passing quarterback. I would just call him a hybrid.
Yeah, and obviously he benefits still quite a bit from them not changing the rule about shoving a quarterback forward.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The Eagles mastered that, and it's honestly it's a little frustrating to watch, even as a fan, because you're
Mm.
like, how do people stop this? And it's you already know what's coming, and there's no mystery to it. But I mean, it works. It works. So he does benefit from it a lot.
Well, a lot of the reason it does work is because of Jason Kelsey and that offensive line. Talk about that line and just how good they are, overall.
Yeah. So that line, man. Oh my God, they've been great since 2017.
Mhm.
Howie Roseman somehow keeps finding guys. He found Mailata, undrafted free agent. Dickerson off a bunch of ACL tears. Like these, he keeps finding great guys, and I think they just all build off Kelsey. So that's why I'm very interested to see when Kelsey's gone next year, and Lane Johnson has to be the guy to really be the leader in that offensive line group. I'm very interested to see where that goes. And I think we're going to take a little drop because Kelsey's a Hall of Fame guy, and I really don't think Cam Jurgens can be a Hall of Fame guy. But yeah, that line, as long as Jason Kelsey is there, that line is top three and most likely one.
Well, now the line, another beneficiary of the line is the run game, and it's always, Jalen Hurts is always going to be a part of that. But talk about the running backs then, and obviously, moving on and trading for DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, and just that group there. What are you expecting from the running backs?
So when we let Miles Sanders go, I was very happy. Miles Sanders really never did it for me. He was never a big play guy. He was kind of just mediocre in all aspects. And I was very happy to see maybe even Kenneth Gainwell get the starting spot. And if he did, I still would have been happy. But now we have Swift and Penny. So when we got Swift, I was very happy because Swift's a 5 yard per carry guy. He's just electric when he is healthy. And that's the issue when he is healthy. But he's been kind of the bell cow guy with Jamal Williams in Detroit. And I think he's going to really benefit him and Penny are both kind of the same player besides the receiving difference. And they're both going to benefit from not being the bell cow guys and having a bunch of depth in that room.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. Like injury history, Swift has had the injury, and obviously, if he is healthy, he is that electric player that you need in that offense. Rashad Penny has also shown flashes with Seattle. Should both of those, players have injuries, um, it sounds like you do have confidence in Kenneth Gainwell to handle a bulk of the carries, um, if he needs to.
So I might get some hate for this for the people who are watching, but I think Kenneth Gainwell was a better running back last year, especially in the playoffs, more efficient than Miles Sanders. So when I was watching him specifically, I remember against the Giants, he was just ripping off 10, 15-yard runs, and the Giants couldn't do anything about it. And his burst and vision was just better than Sanders, and Sanders was just mediocre that whole game. I saw a difference in both of them, and if Kenneth Gainwell, like I said before, if Kenneth Gainwell was the starting running back, I would still be very, very excited for what he could do.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that, and yeah, Boston Scott, who's always seemed to be a giant killer. He always seems to have a big game versus the Giants. And speaking of the NFC East teams, then when you look at the division, what team worries you the most for 2023?
It's always, I think, as long as Jalen Hurts is the quarterback, it's always going to be the Cowboys.
Mm.
And I don't fear the Giants because the Giants, for some reason, can never beat us. I think their record is it's awful. It's like 10-30 or something in the last 10, 20 years. And the Giants, adding Darren Waller, it's so because you still just paid Daniel Jones maybe even more of a cap hit than Jalen Hurts. And now you're gonna have to pay Saquon if he wants to stay. Washington, they never did it for me. I think Sam Howell is going to be a good quarterback, not great, but they got the weapons over there. They have no offensive line, no secondary. They don't do it for me. And then the Cowboys, the Cowboys are going to be the Cowboys. They're always going to fail when it gets to crunch time and playoff time, but every time we play the Cowboys in the regular season and we're both competitive, it's a great game. And I fear Micah Parsons
Mhm.
and having Stephon Gilmore, Trayvon Diggs, Brandon Cooks, CeeDee Lamb, you got a bunch of weapons over there.
But you don't fear the coach Mike McCarthy, do you?
No, no, absolutely not. I just fear the players. I have a friend who's a Cowboys fan, and he absolutely hates Mike McCarthy, and I'm like, as long as he's the coach, you guys are not doing anything. Same thing with Jerry Jones. As long as he's the owner, I do not think you are doing anything.
Well, speaking of coaches, Nick Sirianni really kind of took a step, and I love the behind the scenes when that exchange with one of the referees, basically saying he knew what he was talking about, and talk about him and how he has really added something to this team. And obviously, you're pretty high on him as a coach, aren't you?
Yes, yes. And I remember in the press conference, the first press conference he ever had, he was stuttering. It was all over the place. People were laughing at him. He was talking about growing trees or something, growing flowers. And man, I just think he's a guy who works well with others. I think that it all boils down to that. And whenever I saw him playing basketball with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. He's big on camaraderie. I think he's big on being a team, and he's he's made a relationship with the players very a very big part of his job. And I think his evolution as a coach can be him just being able to have that year under his belt and being able to know the players a little bit better and being able to know about being a coach a little bit better. I think. And then when you talk about the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator leaving, I'm not worried about Jonathan Gannon leaving. I I lobbied for him to leave last year, and he's been a mess with the Cardinals so far. But Shane Steichen, I will definitely miss. And he, Brian Johnson's got big shoes to fill over there at the OC, and I'm hoping that he can just use Jalen Hurts effectively and get this offense going in the beginning stages of next season.
So yeah, I mean, what about Steichen? Are you going to miss most?
He was essential in the evolution of Jalen Hurts, and I just thought that Steichen, he just knows how to use running quarterbacks. He knows how to make them comfortable in a passing offense as well. And building off that, I think Anthony Richardson is going to benefit very well from Steichen being his coach. And I just I really like Steichen as a coach, and I think he got the best out of our players, and that's what worries me the most is at offense, are we going to be the same as we were last year?
Now, you look at the 2023 season. Obviously, we don't have the schedule quite yet. It's going to come pretty soon. But when you look at some of the teams, I mean, not in your division, what are some of the games that worry you the most? Obviously, are you worried maybe about the 49ers at all, or Bills? Obviously, I mean, what teams kind of are you worried about most in 2023 that you face?
I am always going to be the most worried about facing the Chiefs. I can't
Hmm.
even recall the last time we beat the Chiefs handily. And I'm also second, I am most worried about the Cowboys. Again, I'm gonna say it. The Cowboys, they got some really good players over there, man. I'm telling you, Micah Parsons is
Hmm.
every time he steps on the field, he's electric. And another hot take, may get some heat for this, but I'm not that worried about the 49ers.
Hmm.
They just overpaid for Javon Hargrave, who's 31 almost.
Hmm.
And I'm not scared of their secondary. They lost a few guys in free agency, and I don't even know who their quarterback is. You know,
Hmm.
like I'm not afraid of anybody but the Cowboys and NFC.
So, are you a Dak believer then, or I mean, you're worried about Dak?
So that's kind of the problem here. I don't think Dak can ever be great. I think he'll always be good. I'm not a Dak believer, but I'm also not a Dak hater. I think there's games where I watch Dak play and I'm like, this dude can really sling the ball around and he knows where he's going before he even does it. But there's also games like the 49ers game last year. It's like, who is this guy? You know, like
Hmm.
he looks like a backup quarterback at best out there playing the 49ers. And obviously the Eagles just ran him over the next game. So it was kind of just Dak is a very inconsistent player,
Hmm.
very inconsistent player, and he usually plays well against bad competition and plays poorly against great competition.
Now, it is going to be interesting. You add Brandon Cooks to CeeDee Lamb and Gallup as well, a healthy Gallup. That is going to be an interesting receiving core to see if they can, obviously help Dak in that, continued, contention. But when you look at overall, I mean, they lost Zeke. Pollard needs to prove that he can stay healthy and be that. Obviously, he was better than Zeke last year, but it'll be interesting to see if he can be that number one guy for the full season.
Yeah, and they also lost Dalton Schultz to the
Mhm.
Texans. So I'm very interested. I was not very concerned with Jake Ferguson or any of their tight ends last year. But Dalton Schultz was a really good possession guy, like kind of like a Jason Witten type guy.
Mhm.
And whenever Pollard touched the ball, I was a lot more scared than when Zeke touched the ball. I never believed in Zeke since I believe he hurt his knee the one year, and he's just never been the same since. It's like a recurring issue with him, and yeah, I think you just the Cowboys always they're gonna have great players. You know, they're gonna have great talent, especially on the outside, the playmakers, but where where the issue is with the Cowboys is obviously the play calling and the front office, and then you have a bunch of players now, a bunch of very skilled players, but let's see if they can work together. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it takes a lot when you have a team working together to reach the pinnacle, to reach the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl. It takes a lot, and not often do we have at least an NFC team that will continue to be in the Super Bowl. So you look at this team that was in the Super Bowl, got a ton of great experience, and then also got better on defense in the draft and all of that. So, do you see another Super Bowl run for the Eagles? And if so, I mean, would it be like maybe another a rematch of the Chiefs Eagles?
So this is my issue with it. So in the NFC, the only team I'm scared of is the Cowboys. They fold under pressure in the playoffs. I'm not that afraid of the 49ers anymore. And
Hmm.
when you look at the NFC, it's just compared to the AFC, it's like a seventh grade junior high football game, and I think the Eagles can just run through that conference as much as I don't want to say it, because I hate being that guy who's like, oh yeah, the Eagles are going to just run through the conference, but it's like there's no competition over there. And then in the AFC, man, they got 10, 11 teams that can really make a run. And I think you can just flip a coin. I don't think the Chiefs go
Hmm.
back. I don't think the Chiefs go back because their number one receiver right now is slotted in as Kadarius Toney.
Mm-hmm.
And Travis Kelce, I will never bet against Travis Kelce, but he's getting older. And they've had some healthy seasons, very healthy seasons. And I think that the law of averages says that that will eventually come to an end.
Well, speaking of law averages, I mean, there are a couple other NFC teams that think they're contenders. Minnesota Vikings, having a great season, but they have to come back to earth as well with their one score wins, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And over there in the NFC North, man, that division's wide open. It's absolutely wide open. And I personally believe the Lions, as bad as that sound, are the best team in that division.
I agree.
And
Yep.
then the Bears are actually my number two in that division.
I,
Packers three, Vikings four, because the Vikings
oh,
have no defense.
so yeah,
Absolutely no defense.
so I do agree with you on that because the Bears added some great pieces, being number two. Although the Packers, the quarterback is going to be a huge thing, and offensively, um, the Vikings are going to be there. Defensively, Vikings fans are pretty excited about adding their new defensive coordinator and all of that. But I agree. I mean, uh, it, it's going to take a lot for them to really turn that around, especially since they didn't have very many picks in the draft.
Yeah, and I think they lost Patrick Peterson, which was their number one corner. Um, they also lost Cameron Dantzler, I believe, who was their number two corner. They
Mhm.
lost Eric Kendricks. They lost. I'm pretty sure that's the end of who they lost, but they still. I mean, they have the pass rushers, the two pass rushers, but other than that, like who are you looking at over there? You got Harrison Smith. Their defense is just deteriorated, and they got to rebuild that if they
Mhm.
want any shot of going to the Super Bowl.
What about the Seahawks? Do they worry you at all?
So the Seahawks as a team overall worry me a lot, but Geno Smith going to Philadelphia does not worry me at all. I think Geno Smith is a good quarterback, but he's not going to be the guy going into an NFC Championship game and winning. Like some quarterbacks just have that it to them. And Geno Smith, I think he can be good. He is good, but he can never be great because he just he's hitting that peak for me right now.
Yeah, it is interesting because yeah, I mean, when you have a quarterback that does well, they have to continue to prove it. Obviously, I think Jalen Hurts needs to continue to improve it, but he proved it by going to the Super Bowl. So that I mean, that's huge right there. But you look at Geno's track record. He's got to prove he can do it another year. We talked about the Lions. I do think that they continue to take another step forward and win the division. But Jared Goff, I mean, he's got to prove it as well that he can continue to sustain success as a starter as well.
Yeah, for sure. And a very underrated pick in this year's draft will be Hendon Hooker. I
Mm.
think, getting him, I believe it was either the third or the fourth round, you picking up Hendon Hooker, that's great value. And I mean, Gardner Johnson, he was great for Philly last year. Losing him to the Lions kind of sucks, but I think they overpaid for him because he's injury riddled and he's not a great tackler. Um, but other than that, their defense is stout. They've got playmakers. They've got the offensive line. They got Hawkinson. Or sorry, they do not have Hawkinson. Uh, Minnesota has Hawkinson, and they have Montgomery. I really like Gibbs.
Hmm.
So yeah, they got a team over there. And when I saw that roster construction, I was a little afraid, but not to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, they're gonna beat us in the playoffs in the wing.
Yeah, that makes a difference. I think Sam Laporta was the other Iowa tight
Yeah.
end that you were looking at, and
Mhm.
I actually grabbed him in my dynasty rookie draft, and so um, I think he can continue to be good, especially kind of in that system. So one last thing I wanted to ask you about, obviously you play fantasy football, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when you look at the Eagles roster, and when you look at players that you're targeting in fantasy football league drafts, what are some players that you would say you would be targeting that are on the Eagles roster today?
So I'm not going after any of the running backs. That's
Mhm.
that's for sure. So really, if I wanted to pick a sleeper, I don't even know because the Eagles are they just have so much depth. So it's like nobody's really going to come in and really be a sleeper. But if I had to pick someone that you had to pick in like the 16th round, pick up as your last bench spot, I would go Quez Watkins. He's got a high ceiling, he's fast, and he has to prove people wrong this year to get a big contract. But I'm always going to be targeting AJ Brown. Not as much. I'm going to be targeting AJ Brown more than I'm targeting Smitty because I think just AJ Brown has that big playability and he's going to catch a lot more. He's going to have a lot more targets and a lot more receptions. And obviously Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is my number one pick, and as far as quarterbacks go in fantasy.
Now, as far as I'm not sure if you play in any leagues that have defense. Would you be targeting the Eagles' defense then, or would you kind of wait on them as a whole?
So I had a draft last week as it was an impulse decision. It was $50 buy-in, nothing much. Um, so we had the draft, and I was doing some research as far as defense goes, and I was like, I always pick the Eagles defense every single year. But this year I was like, looking at their schedule, looking at the strength of schedule, I was like, I can't see myself taking them. And funny enough, I went all the way down to the Houston Texans and took them with my
Wow.
last pick because I looked at their schedule. They play in the AFC South,
Mhm.
and they play all the worst teams as far as divisions go. And I was very happy with taking the Houston Texans. As funny as it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, you get D'Amico Ryan's, and there'll be a lot kind of there then with Will Anderson as well. Yeah, that's an interesting pick there.
Yeah, I really like Derek Stingley. I really like Pitre. Jerry Hughes still got some in the tank. Will Anderson. They got it. They got a good team over there. They really do. They're not going to make any noise this year, but look out for them a few years down the line to maybe make a wild card spot because I think Jacksonville might run that division for 10 years because of Trevor Lawrence.
That's a
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and D'Amico Ryans is going to be a good head coach. He's a great defensive mind. You saw what he did with the Niners. He's going to do the same thing. Anderson and Bosa. Maybe Anderson might not get to the height that Bosa got to, but he's going to be a great player.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. I definitely appreciate you coming. Where can everyone find you again?
Logan_Scholl on Twitter, Instagram, and then on TikTok, Logan.Scholl.
Awesome. Well, everyone like, subscribe, follow Logan on all of his platforms, and thanks again. It'll be interesting to see how this, you know, off season continues to be put together, and I'm ready for schedules and the season.
Yep, I'm very excited. I think the Eagles are going to make a run this year. You know, AFC's tight. It's going to be a really exciting season.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Logan. Once again, this has been an NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Philadelphia Eagles. Thanks again.